Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Canucks Conversation. My name is Dave Wajelli. That is Irfaan Gaffar joining me in studio. How's it going today?
What's up? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, man. Really appreciate you filling in for Harman Dayal, who got after it, as we all saw yesterday, as the light continued to leave his hotel room, as did Harman, and he is not with us today. But he'll be back. He'll be back on Friday. Tomorrow I'll have another guest co-host. But today, Irf, very excited to have you. I heard you on Rink Wide with our pal Jeff Patterson last night. Did a phenomenal job there, and we'll talk a lot about that game between the Vancouver Canucks and the Nashville Predators. But before we do that, I need to tell you that today's episode of Canucks Conversation is brought to you by HSBC World Rugby Sevens, Western Canada's largest sporting event, and this year is the 9th time the event has visited Vancouver as part of the World Rugby Sevens series. HSBC Vancouver Sevens, where high caliber rugby and the ultimate party weekend collide. SVNS truly is a sporting event like no other, and a weekend you won't want to miss. For 3 full days from February 23rd to 25th, BC Place is going to be the place to be. 12 women's and 12 men's sevens teams, including 2 Canadian squads, take to the pitch for 3 full days of jam-packed rugby and partying. Tickets on sale now at vansevens.com, starting from just $40 per day. Have you ever been?
Yep.
Okay, tell me your stories.
No, I can't.
Did you dress up?
No.
Okay.
We went, I think it was one of the first years before COVID kind of happened, and we only were on the concourse. Like, we didn't even see the field, just hung out, walked around the concourse for a couple of times.
I love it.
Yeah.
I like seeing the costumes that people wear. Like, I think that's awesome. I think it's so much fun. Like,
Yeah,
I've seen people dressed as like giant babies. Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's Halloween in March or
Yeah,
April or whatever
so
it is.
sick.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's awesome. Early in the show here, Jeremy Lee in our YouTube live chat said, "Wow, Harm got jacked."
That's a compliment. Definitely not. Harm did get taller, though.
Harm did get taller.
And
That was the
found lighting.
conversation. Yeah, that was the conversation you and I were having right before we started, was that I was explaining to you that our framing, Harman had a problem early into the partnership that I looked taller than him on screen. So now you look way taller, which technically you are. But it's very funny how our framing works, because it's all set up for Harman's ego. Okay, let's move on. We have a game to talk about here. All 4 lines score in the Vancouver Canucks 5-2 victory over the Nashville Predators. Just some takeaways from the game.
The first period was kind of ho-hum. I think it was 2 good teams feeling each other out for the most part. And then, the Canucks, get up to the lead, and then Nashville makes it 2-1 in the second period. And then it was game over after that. The Canucks dominated for the rest of the hockey game. They didn't let the Predators even come close. They took care of the center of the ice. Shots for the Predators were only from the outsides. Casey DeSmith was unreal. I think we're going to not have a controversy, but I think we're going to have a conversation on, is Casey DeSmith going to start warranting a lot more starts for this Vancouver Canucks team than he is? But they were good. They took care of business. You mentioned all 4 lines scoring. Unfortunately, the 4th line was a -2. They're not going to like that, but it was a garbage time goal from Cody Glass. But yeah, I mean, they look good. Got, contributions from Elias Pettersson. I know people say he might have been struggling a little bit or not playing his best hockey. Obviously, Quinn Hughes getting back on the score sheet. And it was another professional win. And that's exactly what Rick Tocchet liked to see.
I wonder, let's focus on Casey DeSmith for a sec, because he played very well in that game. Obviously, he lets in 2 goals. Probably should have been 1. I'm sure
he's not going to like the last one.
Exactly. Yeah. I wonder, because you just brought up a really good point, that it's not a controversy, but at some point he might start warranting more starts. I find that fascinating, because the way I look at this season, and a big topic of today's show, is who are the real Canucks. And yes, we're going to be looking at their month of October, November, and now, of course, as we get into mid to late December. One thing that they did at the start of the year was they were not afraid to go to Casey DeSmith. Like, if you think back to the start of this season, they shellacked the Edmonton Oilers in their first game. The Oilers are going to come out hungry. Everybody's ready for them to come back firing when they're in their home opener. And they go with Casey DeSmith. And, that was partly because Thatcher Demko was puking in his mask in the tail moments of the home opener for the Canucks. But it didn't stop. Like, they kept alternating. They kept kind of going back to Casey DeSmith. So they got away from that in November. And my question to you, Irf, is that when we look at where this is progressing, do you think we go beyond what we saw in October? Or do you think, like, and when I say beyond, I mean, like, they're legitimately splitting starts. Like, every start, they are switching goaltenders. Do you think we get to that point, or do you think it just goes back to October? Because I think that's more the direction that I lean in.
Well, I didn't think that DeSmith was going to get this start against the Predators. If you looked at the schedule, you said, okay, this is probably Demko, and DeSmith might get the start at home against San
Jose,
Jose before the break. But yeah, it's interesting because they trade for him on the eve of the season, and he's become a very serviceable backup. They might have probably, if you look at it, the best goaltending tandem in the National Hockey League right now. And I think that when you're Thatcher Demko and when you're the Vancouver Canucks, when you're Rick Tocchet, you're Ian Clark, you're that coaching staff, you look at it and say, you have a plan. You look at the 82 game schedule, you look at your back-to-backs, you look at your opponents, you look at your strength of schedule and where you want to slot these guys in. And you have certain starts on your calendar for DeSmith. Now, things obviously change based on obvious injuries, if someone's sick and what have you. But I think with DeSmith playing the way he is, and with Demko playing the way that he is, obviously when he's in, he's going to want to run a games. You're going to want Demko playing the brunt of the games in March and April, especially if you're going to be a playoff team and want to compete. But I think you're going to see a lot more DeSmith than we anticipated. And I don't think that's a bad thing for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you brought up the playoffs. When you get later into the season, if you want to go on a deeper playoff run, like you can't be looking at the season and say, well, okay, Thatcher Demko is going to make 50 starts or 40 starts. No, because when you get into playoffs, ideally Thatcher Demko's making about 20 more starts. Well, most ideally he's making 16 more starts. But we'll get there when we get there. Okay, anything else that you wanted to say about the game before we kind of move on to this broader conversation about who the real Canucks are?
No, not really. I mean, look, it was a good win for that team. Niels Höglander, 10 goals on this season. I think that's a very fascinating story with this hockey club because he's doing everything that Andrei Kuzmenko isn't. Right? He's going to the net. He's putting himself in positions to succeed. He's making all the right plays. He's making life miserable for other defensemen on the opposing teams. And I think that, he's following the instruction. He's following what his coaching staff is saying to him. And when you look at it, there were three players that I had circled on when there was going to be some trade talks or if the Canucks were going to move someone when they were thinking about it or if it was something was going to happen. It was Höglander, it was Connor Garland, and it was Andrei Kuzmenko. I don't think they can touch that Garland line right now, to be completely honest. Höglander's probably their best asset, to be completely fair. And Andrei Kuzmenko, in all honesty, I don't know when he's going to get back into the lineup. It could be against the Dallas Stars, but it's not Rick Tocchet's style to touch a lineup that wins the previous game
and wins the previous game the way the Canucks won that game. Like I was looking at this in the stand sheets that I wrote last night, and I was like, let's say you want to get Andrei Kuzmenko back in the lineup. Who are you taking out? Because the guy that I kind of landed on was Sam Lafferty, where
we're not taking him out. You're probably taking PDG out if you're taking anybody out.
Okay, so that's the thing. I like the way PDG played last night. And I thought Sam Lafferty, a guy who's kind of lost his spot in the top six, kind of hasn't done much for me lately. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I think my answer is that I don't take anybody out, and I wouldn't put Andrei Kuzmenko back in this lineup if I was the coach.
Here's the thing. I think that Andrei Kuzmenko is getting fourth line minutes right now. He's playing 11 minutes a night, maybe 10, and 7 of that are at even strength because of all the power play time. My problem is he doesn't do anything on the power play. So then you look at it if you're a coaching staff and you go, well, what is he really doing when he's on the ice? Is he hurting us more? He's been -2, -3 in a couple of games as a fourth liner, not getting much ice time. So then you have to look at it and say, okay, we kind of do need to bench him a little bit. And we kind of have to send a message here for him to get back into being able to read the play, being able to play defense, being able to play both sides of the puck. He's got to be Charlie Conway. He's got to play two-way hockey for Coach Gordon Bombay, but he doesn't do it.
This is the thing that I keep coming back to, Irf, is that yesterday, Tocchet, when he was explaining why he scratched Kuzmenko, he just said, it's like, it wasn't even to send a message. It was just that I think this is our best chance to win against a team that has won 13 of their last 16 games. And sure enough, he was absolutely correct. So if you're going into Dallas, another one of these teams that you're going to want all guys firing on all cylinders, I don't think you put Kuzmenko back in that lineup, especially when the lineup that you just iced gave you what they gave you in that game against the Predators. It's interesting. I wonder where this heads.
I'd be shocked if he played tomorrow. Let's just put it that way. And I think that, you mentioned the Dallas Stars, and that's a big opponent. So that's one of their tougher opponents. Obviously, Nashville has been playing well of late, but the Dallas Stars are a very good opponent. They're probably going to be there, in the Western Conference and in the Western Conference Finals or around in that area. So the Canucks, it's a good measuring stick game for the Canucks. Obviously, no Ottinger for Dallas, but it's still a big game. And Rick Tocchet's not coaching hockey games to be popular in the dressing room. He's not coaching hockey games to make Andrei Kuzmenko or his agent happy. He's coaching hockey games because he's paid to win.
Yeah.
And if he thinks the lineup is not good enough to win this hockey game, he's not going to put the players in to play that game. And I think it's just that simple.
And 22 times, Rick Tocchet has been absolutely correct about that. Okay, we'll move on here. We'll move on to our conversation about who the real Canucks are. But before we do that, I should mention to you that this segment is brought to you by our friends at Four Winds Brewing. Family owned and operated in Delta, home to the Four Winds Light Lager, a crisp, clean, and easy drinking beer. A beer for everyone, a perfect beer for before, after, or during the game. You're going to want to stock up on Four Winds Light Lagers. You're watching this team make their march to the President's Trophy. Ask for Four Winds Light Lager at your local liquor store or have some delivered right to your door through the online shop at fourwindsbrewing.ca. Okay. Or if I want to ask you this question, who are the real Canucks? Because it feels like we've seen two versions of them. It feels like for the month of November, we saw a 500 hockey club, and it feels like in October and for most of December now, we have seen a team that, I don't know. Like, what's this team ceiling right now? This team, I'm talking about the team in October and December, because look, they were on a 140-point pace for the season in October. So
yeah, I mean, well, that definitely wasn't gonna
last, and it didn't. But who are they? Who is this team?
I think this is a team with elite level goaltending, a really, really, really good defenseman in Quinn Hughes, probably an elite level defenseman, another good defenseman in Philip Hronek, and then beyond that, they have some guys. And I think when you go to the forward group, your top six is heavy. You have, Elias Pettersson, and you've got JT Miller, and you've got a guy like Brock Besser, who's having himself a hell of a season. And then you've got your bottom six forward group. And that's my question mark for this team is, can that bottom six group, when you're in the playoffs going up against the Colorado Avalanche, when you're playing against, teams like the Vegas Golden Knights, what can they do to match up? I mean, I always go back to last year. The Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup, and William Karlsson was their third line center.
Yep.
It was wild. I mean, obviously you make the trades and you get Jack Eichel and things like that, and it changes things a lot. But this Vancouver Canucks team, they're evolving right before our eyes. They're growing. They're maturing. I think when you have wins like you did the other night against Nashville Predators, it shows some growth. They score to make it 2-1 and then instantly bang, bang. The Canucks don't give them any breathing room. They're 19-0 when going into the third period. They close games. Yep. They don't lose when they have the lead in the third period. And that's something that we couldn't say about this Vancouver Canucks team in years past. And I think that's a testament to the coaching staff and to the buy-in of the players in this group. And obviously they're getting contributions. Quinn Hughes is going to have a ridiculous season. He's obviously, a Norris Trophy favorite. Brock Besser, we're talking about Brock Besser kind of being, winning the Rocket Richard. Obviously Matthews has 25 goals now. And then you're getting contribution from JT Miller. Like, if you'd have told me JT Miller is going to be in the top 10 NHL scoring this season, it's wild. And a guy like Philip Hronek, I mean, he's got a bajillion points too.
Yeah.
They're getting contributions from everyone. And I think that's a big thing, but I still think the jury's out on this team. I'm not ready to call them a cup contender. I'm ready to think that they can get into the playoffs and then kind of see what happens.
That makes one of us. Wait for my Betway bet of the day, folks. It's an absolute heater. But I do find this conversation kind of interesting because you brought up the bottom six, and I almost wonder if the Canucks run not hinges on, because we know how important their top six players are, how important their goaltending is, just how important that third line that's been so good lately, how important they really are to this team. And if they can keep driving the bus the way they have for that bottom six, and really for the Canucks lineup on a lot of nights recently, just how important is that line for this team?
Well, they don't get scored on.
Yeah.
And I think that's every coach's dream scenario, is you have a line that you can put out and depend on in so many different situations to not get scored on. Dakota Joshua had 4 shots the other night. I mean, he's playing well. Connor Garland, the changing agents and the trade talks and everything before the season, scoring opening night, obviously. And then the way that he's been able to cement himself on that line has been remarkable. So when you look at it and say they're tough to play against, which they are, they make life miserable for other teams. But I think the biggest thing for them is they don't get scored on, and that's huge. But it's still early, man. It's still December, so we have a very, very, very long way to go before we really look at this Canucks team and say, are they for real? Because I think that you can play as many games as you want. You can beat the Edmonton Oilers 50-0 in November, December, January, February. Until you're doing these things and playing consistent hockey and not losing games in March and April, when other teams are fighting and clawing to make the playoffs and other teams are doing that, you don't really know who you are. I think they're still trying to figure out their identity, to be completely honest, but sky's the limit. I mean, you mentioned the ceiling. Sky's definitely the limit. I mean, there's definitely potential there. And it's on the backs of Thatcher Demko, Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, Brock Besser, and JT Miller. I think those are the guys that, the core group of this team that is going to carry them through.
I think I'm buying in a little bit more. Like I understand what you're saying.
You're giddy.
I am giddy. I am a little giddy.
It's kind of weird, but it's okay.
You're waiting until like March and April. I understand that. I understand the games are going to get harder. I just think that I look at this team and I see how they played in October, right? And then we knew the regression was coming. And Harman and I did at least 9 episodes about what it was going to look like when this team regressed. And what we said was like, yeah, they're going to regress from their 140-point pace. But what does it look like when they come back down to earth? And I think we saw that for the month of November when they had the toughest part of their schedule for the season. I don't know if this is a crazy hot take to just throw out there, but I'm going to do it. That's kind of what I do on this show. I'm a vibes guy. I throw out shows. I don't think they're going to have another month this season that was as bad as the month of November was. And keep in mind, in the month of November, like they played 500 hockey. Like they were a fine team during that month of November. I don't think they're going to have a stretch like that for the rest of the season.
So you think they're going to play 500 or above the rest of the year?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a take for sure.
Every single month.
I think, okay. Right. You just look at their strength of schedule and who they play and things like that. But I think if they can find themselves in a situation where they're comfortable and, they know where they're going to be at. I think Jeff did the math the other night. If they play 500 hockey basically the rest of this season, they get to 92 points. And 92 points probably gets you in the playoffs.
Yep.
Right? So it's just with the way the Western Conference is. And if you look at that from basically that explanation of it, you say, okay, they can afford a loss here or there. I don't think they're going to stomp on teams every single day. And I don't think we should expect that from the Vancouver Canucks. But they're, as long as they stay healthy, I think that's key, right? Your top guys have to stay healthy. They're going to lose hockey games. I think that is pretty evident, and it's going to happen. They're going to have nights where they don't play well. They're going to have nights where they play against really, really good teams. They're going to have nights where they play against the Colorado Avalanche, who beat them, the Vegas Golden Knights, who beat them, when the Calgary Flames, and when basically they said that the Canucks don't like being played against in a physical manner, they out-physicaled them, and they ended up winning that hockey game. So the Canucks kind of have to figure it out. And I think that the beauty of it is when you look at this coaching staff and the way that this team is built, they're maturing before our eyes.
Yep.
Right? Rick Tocchet's maturing with his group. His team's maturing. His leaders are maturing. Quinn Hughes is evolving into the captain of this team and obviously an elite NHL defenseman. Thatcher Demko. You know where you're going to get every time he starts. Yep. And then you're seeing contributions and things from different players. But basically, to your point, I don't know if I agree that they're going to play 500 hockey every month for the rest of the season, but it'll be a fun rest of the season to watch. That's for sure.
And I forgot, Frank Seravalli's been in the background, and I'm sure he's heard my take, and I'm sure he's about to rip into me for it. So let's bring in Frank, brought to you by the Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool game. Wendy's is letting you win real food with your fantasy teams this year with the Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool. For those of you who dream of smoking the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning. But here's the big secret to lineups. It's all serendipitous, like Wendy's new limited edition chicken strips and French toast sticks. Sometimes the best teammates are the ones you'd least suspect. Sign up to play Daily Faceoff Survivor Pool to win weekly prizes like the new chicken strips and French toast sticks from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. Let's bring him in. Frank Seravalli. Frank, before I get to my first question, I'll just let you, what do you have to say to me?
I actually didn't hear your take. I guess I
good.
must have been late, but I do. So Irf, I will bet you a steak dinner that the Canucks play at least 500 hockey every single month the rest of the way.
That's what that was my take. I thought you would disagree. Let's go.
I've been saying it all along. First off, the Canucks are a good team. Second, 500 hockey is really nothing to speak of in today's NHL. It doesn't get you into the playoffs. It's actually not even close to the playoffs. And if the Canucks only played 500 the rest of the way, just a correction on your math, they'd end up with 95 points.
Okay,
not 92.
3 more.
But
so take that, Irf.
Are you on?
I'm not a math guy. I'll tell you that right now. Hey, I'm on, Frank. I'm always on.
Irf's always down for a good dinner.
I'm always down for a good dinner.
He always knows where to go.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Okay, well, Frank, I didn't know you'd be on my side about this, so that leads me perfectly into my first question. Why do you think the Canucks are winning both the President's Trophy and the Stanley Cup this year?
I don't on either account. However, I do think the Canucks are a really good team. And I think that Irf, you hit it right on the head when you said that they're still maturing and getting better right in front of our eyes. And I think with the boxes that they have checked, that they are going to be a formidable playoff team to go up against in the first round.
Yeah.
The Pacific is murderous. Like, and it all depends on where it shakes out, because where do the Oilers slot in, assuming that they get in? Who would Vancouver face in round one? I mean, it's going to be a tough draw, I think, no matter what. But I think the Canucks are going to have a puncher's chance.
Yeah. I mean, look, I might agree with you there. I think that there still needs to be some improvement. I'm not sold on that bottom 6 forward group. And then after Hughes and Ronick and maybe, Cole and Susie, that bottom 2 defense pairing isn't that great. But I mean, you don't have to play that much in the playoffs and when you get there, I guess. Frank, I guess my question to you is, how much does Jim Rutherford, I know, and him and Patrick Allvin have done a lot of work to improve this hockey team, but how much more might we see coming as we get into, obviously, after Christmas and maybe into the trade deadline? Like, you look at this team and we talk about playoffs, but how active might they be?
I think they're going to be pretty active. I mean, Look how aggressive they've been to this point. And some would say that they've tinkered around the edges. I would say that they've made a bunch of really smart bets to stack little incremental 3 to 5% wins on top of each other that have really been difference makers for this team when it comes to the results that we're seeing on a night-to-night basis. I think the big question is, like, look at someone like Kuzmenko, who we've talked about. There's been lots of talk. Is he out there and available? Are the Canucks going to move him or not? I think it's a bit premature for that. I don't have any evidence to this point yet that he's someone that they're interested in moving. But let's say this continues on, where he's someone that is clearly a square peg in a round hole for this team. Think about the cap dollars in play. Think about how other teams might view him. And then think about some of the other upgrades that you might be able to make across your lineup if you were to ship someone like him out. So I think this front office is eager and open to do business. I think they're willing to shake things up and question the status quo. The reason why I'm not ready to make any bold proclamation is because I'm not entirely sold that the rest of the NHL is on the same page.
I'm so curious about this, Frank, because it's a really good point. And then you think about this Rutherford Allvin regime. They've had a pretty firm eye on the future while retooling their team. Obviously, they moved a first-round pick last year, but they had another first-round pick to use. They only got one this year. Do you get the sense that that might be in play at the trade deadline?
I guess tell me where this team is at in the standings. Tell me what they might be able to get their hands on. I don't see the Canucks being a team that's going to be out there pounding the pavement and saying, hey, we're going to move our first-round pick to get a rental back in return. But if you could find someone, and looking at the playbook and probably how it's not going to be duplicated again based on the success that they've had with Ronick, like, if you could find someone that fits your age scheme, that could be part of your team for a while, that can help you now and for the future, I don't think the Canucks would blink for a second and they'd put that first round pick in play. They've had too many first round picks, too many, by the way, that haven't panned out. And I think it goes to show you that if you can be aggressive in the moment and make a game-changing move to help you now and for the future, that's the way to play it, as opposed to, especially if you're a playoff team and picking at 22 or 24, you're dealing with a hope bet at that point.
Yeah, I don't think the first round pick will be in play. And I do agree with you, Frank. You're not making moves just to get a rental to try and win a playoff round. I think it's got to be, I think this management group's a lot smarter than that. What's been the talk around the league about the job that Rick Tocchet's done with this group? I know, he came in and obviously people know his mentality and the way that he coaches, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Rick Tocchet's job that he's been able to do with this team.
Yeah, I think it's been incredibly impressive. I think the buy-in that he's gotten from the team has been important. I think he's been able to help mold and shape some of the pieces that have come in. I think, to me, to really understand Rick Tocchet and the attitude and persistence and drive that he has to get better, like, he's no nonsense. You show up, you're ready to work. And if not, you're not going to be part of the mix. And I think you look for me at someone like JT Miller, and we talked about him quads last week and his impact. And we're talking about unsung heroes, and it's kind of hard to say that, the leading scorer of the team is an unsung hero, but it's not a foregone conclusion, essentially, what you'd be getting out of JT Miller at this spot, given where he was 1 year ago, when it looked like he didn't really care, when it looked like he might not be engaged at every moment. To see that buy-in from him, to see, like, Rick Tocchet has had a real long, sustained history in the NHL of getting the most out of players that were sort of deemed difficult to deal with. Phil Kessel is his shining example. He was the Phil Kessel whisperer in Pittsburgh. That, not to equate the two, but that he's been able to squeeze as much out of Miller as he has, I think is a real big, he deserves a tip of the cap for that. Like, that's been a big part of this season's success. And you could just tell being there at training camp this year that this team meant business. I think the Ian Cole addition has been huge. And I think he's someone that obviously understands Tocchet and Rutherford and their view, and has a 9-year playoff streak on the line, that he came to Vancouver with no idea of giving up on that he wanted to push that to 10. And I just think the whole mood around this team has been different, in large part to their coach.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like, when Rick Tocchet was hired, there was rumors that, they did this because they needed to reel JT Miller. Rick Tocchet was getting questions about JT Miller and how he was going to manage this player in his intro press conference as Canucks head coach. He was getting questions about JT Miller. He was ready for those questions. Like, he talked about how he was a similar player to that. And look, the relationship between those two guys is obviously very well chronicled. Do you have any final Canuck questions? Because I want to move around the league a little bit.
No,
okay.
I think I'm good. Yeah.
Frank, what the hell's going on in Colorado? We see this from Taves. We hear about Lekkonen's dad. Like, what is going on in Colorado right now?
It's going to sound funny to say, and normally I'd rather pour gasoline on the fire than tamp it down. I kind of think this is much to do about nothing. The Lekkonen thing, I think, was motivational fuel for one day for Mikko Rantanen, who him and Lekkonen are pretty close. I happen to also know really well Lekkonen's father, Ismo Lekkonen. He's been to a number of Stanley Cup finals in a row, which I'm almost at every year. And I've spent lots of time with him, meals and beverages. And he's not really one of those guys that is up for the drama or to really play something up. And so I was kind of surprised to hear those comments. I think, in part, at least listening to Ismo Lekkonen and him tell his side of the story, that they're probably taken a little bit out of context. But it's sort of like, some of the best players in the world, think back to Michael Jordan, the tiniest slight is enough to get you going. And for a guy that hadn't scored in 9 games, he goes out and has a 3-point night and then sort of says afterwards, like, hey, thanks, that was for you. When it comes to Devon Taves and his comments, definitely a little bit surprised. And I feel like any team that loses to the Blackhawks, who basically have like 12 legitimate NHL players on their roster, like, it's not many more than that. And that team wins, and Connor Bedard's able to help lift that team to a victory on home ice with really little support, that it probably really sticks in everyone's craw a little bit. And you see some of the frustration come out. But I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking at the Avs this year. They're tied for first in their division. I know that they've hit a tiny skid the last 10 days here, but does anyone really have any concern for the Avs and their ability to be a dominant playoff team?
Well, that's kind of why I look at it and say, okay, this might what you said might be much of nothing, but how much have they missed Gabriel Landeskog's leadership? I think that's my question there. I mean, I know you have McKinnon and he's a superstar in this league, but how much have they missed the leadership of their captain?
I say this with all due respect to Gabriel Landeskog, but the Colorado Avalanche are Nathan McKinnon's team.
No, 100%. And it's just like here, I think, in Vancouver. I think they're JT Miller's team.
You could wear whatever letter you want. I happened to be around the Avs a couple weeks ago, and I was standing in the hallway, and someone said, hey, what time's the bus? And someone replied, whenever McKinnon says it's time. I mean, that he's like quite literally driving the bus on that team, on the ice, off the ice. He's pushing everyone, pushing different buttons. It's clear that Jared Bednar obviously listens to him and takes his counsel. So I'm sure there's some part of Gabriel Landeskog and his experience being a captain at such a young age in this league that, you know, there's a calming influence that comes with that. But it's a hard question to answer because it's also been a pretty long stretch of time that they've been without Landeskog.
Frank, we'll close it on a Canucks question because the chat has a few for you. But this is one that's kind of been thrown around recently is Nikita Zadorov's next contract. One, do you think it'll be with the Canucks? And two, what do you think he signs for?
One, I don't think it'll be with the Canucks. I think he's going to end up being a rental, and I think probably at the price the Canucks paid, they're fine to use him as such. Obviously, they're certainly interested in the player, though, so I certainly wouldn't want to rule that out. But it certainly sounds like listening to Zadorov that he believes he's in a different stratosphere contract-wise than I think most of the rest of the league views him. And that's a big reason why the Calgary Flames were never really seriously contemplating keeping him, because he wants more than they believe he would deserve on their blue line, which is mostly in a third pair role. And so I can't really ballpark an AAV and what that looks like. Like my guess would be somewhere between 4.5 and 5. Like, is that too high? Is that too low on an AAV? I don't really know how to pinpoint him exactly, but someone will pay him. I just don't know that the Canucks, especially with the really sizable raise that Philip Hronek is in for. And I got a ton of tweets from last week's appearance. Everyone telling me that I'm out to lunch. I keep the receipts. Just wait. I'm telling you, Philip Hronek, that number starts with an 8 all day long. And if you don't believe me, it just won't. It might not be in Vancouver, but it's definitely happening.
I love it.
That's why he's not in Detroit. Like it's going to start with an 8.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Frank was taking a lot of heat for that last week. So I'm glad you brought that up, Frank. Keep your receipts. I love it. Frank, thank you so much for doing this, man. Appreciate it.
Have a good one, guys. And since I'm assuming, will we talk next week? And if not, have a great Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas to you and yours, man. Brother.
See you guys.
See ya. All right. That was Frank Seravalli, brought to you by the Wendy's Daily Faceoff Survivor game.
Who is he taking heat from? How do people not realize that Hronek is going to start with an 8?
Yeah, like that's...
I don't think that's shocking at all.
No, it's not shocking, but Irf, this is the conversation Harman and I keep having is like the Canucks shouldn't pay him anything that starts with an 8.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that his number is not going to start with an 8.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. But now the conversation shifts to, okay, so the Canucks are going to sign that paycheck for a guy who we haven't seen hold his own on a pairing. We have not seen it yet.
He's playing with the league's best defenseman
That's
right
my
now.
point. So
he doesn't need to hold his own.
But okay, so if Quinn Hughes goes down and you've got this 8+ million guy who can't play by himself, come on.
Fair. I agree, but that's not where contracts are in this day and age.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And I think that's why this is a bigger conversation to have, because it's like, I don't know, they shouldn't trade him, but
no, they're not going to trade him. They traded for him.
All Harman and I have been saying is just make him play by himself. And then you'll have like a sample size that you can bring into negotiations if you're the Canucks, be like, this is what it looked like when this guy played by himself.
That's fair. And then he's going to say, look at what I did and look at what we did together when I was with Quinn Hughes.
Yeah, and then I would say, look what Ethan Bear did with Quinn Hughes. Look what Noah Juleson. Look what Luke Shen. Anybody who plays with Quinn Hughes is going to do well.
Doesn't matter. At this point, we're talking about Phil Hronek.
You're right.
Ethan Bear got $4 million. He's going to get about that in Washington or wherever
he did. He signed. He already signed.
Yet.
No, he's not signed yet. But it's reported at 2 years, $2 million.
He just did a press conference with them.
He's going to sign when I think he's fully ready to go, because there's some insurance thing from the World Championship last year.
I know. I was like, did I miss something? Because he was
doing media availability.
Yeah, I saw him do a skate.
It's definitely the insurance
and
thing.
He had a bit of a spicy take about how, they not only needed him here, they wanted him here. So read between the lines on how you want. Just back to Irf's point, I could totally see, and especially with Alan Walsh as the agent, that's another wrinkle in all of this, is that when they go to negotiate, he's going to say to Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford, Quinn Hughes has never been at this level before.
Yeah.
Now, how much is that because he finally has, an elite defenseman to work with? Hey, I'm just playing you devil's advocate.
You're right.
Right?
Alan
that's
Walsh
how the
would say
negotiation's
that.
gonna
You're
work.
right.
So
He has jobs to do. He's an agent.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
you're right. You're absolutely right. I'm just saying that's a load of crap.
Pump those tires.
Come on. Like, are we really throwing out the take that, oh yeah, Filip Hronek has really elevated Quinn Hughes? Quinn Hughes couldn't do this.
Quinn
without Filip
Hughes-
Hronek.
Did Quinn Hughes have this many points at this point last season?
No.
With not playing with Filip Hronek.
No,
There
but
you go. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
You're right. You're
And
right.
remember,
This is all going to be brought up for negotiations.
Remember here-
Yeah. Go on.
Luke Shen got a nice contract
Yeah.
from Nashville
Mhm.
playing with Quinn Hughes.
Yep.
So
Quinn Hughes
there
can
you
get
go.
everybody paid.
Yeah.
I know. Quinn Hughes.
The royalty checks are
Yeah.
coming in.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, we've had some listeners who really thought Noah Juleson was the answer because of what he did with Quinn Hughes. And look, start of the year, we're like, oh, maybe
No.
Cole McWard can do it.
You got to
It's
be
like,
able to
come on.
play.
And
Yeah.
and the chat's buzzing right now. I asked, is Hronek worth $8 million? You're getting people saying, no, he's not even worth 7.
I love it.
I totally agree. Hronek will get 8 or more,
Yeah.
7.5. He's worth 8+ on this team, but they can't afford him. So
Okay.
shout out to the chat. They're always
Yeah,
got some,
we got a
good
lot of
takes
people in the
there.
chat. If you're new, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you know when we go live. It is Monday to Friday at 2 p.m. Let's get to anyone else and really dive in to the chat here. It's time for anyone else, presented by DoorDash. It's our listeners' chance to get involved and hit us up in the YouTube live chat, and it's also our listeners' chance to get 25% off and 0 delivery fees on their first order of $15 or more. That's right, for a limited time, 25% off and 0 delivery fees when they enter the code NATION25. That's all capital letters, NATION, and the numbers 25. Offer valid in Canada, subject to change, terms apply. Holidays are fast approaching. With the restaurants, grocery, pharmacies, bakeries, flower shops, and more, DoorDash really has everything you need to make the holidays special. Okay, Irf, this is one I want to throw at you because we were talking about Filip Hronek, and another guy who needs a new contract is Dakota Joshua. And
He's not getting 8.
yeah,
But-
yeah, he's not getting 8, not quite. But this is just something that I was thinking about on my drive into the office today. Was I think one thing this management regime's done well that they need a little more credit for, I think, is their pro scouting and like their ability to go identify a guy who they can go after and can elevate, and their development system, like how they've really transformed everything in Abbotsford and the development staff as a whole. And the thing that I keep coming back to is something that we brought up when Carson Soucy was signed, that instead of paying for Carson Soucy, which it was just for a argument's sake, it wasn't like, oh, they can't pay Carson Soucy. It was just that the Canucks really need to start to focus on getting the next Carson Soucy, like a guy who they can get at a bargain, come in, play on your third pair, be that guy that goes ahead. And I think that's why we keep saying, yeah, maybe Zadorov isn't going to work out, because you're basically signing another third pair guy that you believe can go into your top 4 defense group. But if you already have Carson Soucy signed, it doesn't make a ton of sense to go get something done with Nikita Zadorov. So it just got me thinking that with Dakota Joshua, there has to be a certain point where you walk, just like there was with Tyler Mott. Grady, your mic's on. Just like there was with Tyler Mott. And at some point, you need to be able to say, okay, we're going to trade this player for an asset, or we're okay with letting him walk in the offseason because we are going to go find the next Dakota Joshua.
I agree. I think that's a very good take. Look, I've always said, and I will continue to say it for the rest of my life when it comes to players and contracts, you are going to have the absolute best performance from any player in their contract season. I don't care who it is. I don't care what it is. And Dakota Joshua is proving that. Look at the way this season started for Dakota Joshua. Rick Tocchet basically threw him under the bus.
Yep.
And it was like, this guy is questioning his professionalism, if he wanted to be an NHLer, and what happened. And obviously Dakota wanted to pick the NHL route instead of everything else, and turned it around. And now he's on one of the best third lines probably in hockey right now. And he is facing a significant raise, but you can't overpay if you're the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah.
They've overpaid in the past and have these third and fourth liners you're giving $2, $3, $4 million
Yeah.
bucks to, where they cannot afford to do. Yes, the cap is going to go up, and it's going to go up, a little bit more, not next season, but the season after, and the season after that, you're going to see a really large increase, but you still need to find your diamonds in the rough. You still need to go have your European scouting, find guys that are playing in the Swedish leagues, that are playing in different leagues. Your North American scouting needs to be good, and your development has to be good. And the college free agency as well has been a gold mine for a lot of teams in the National Hockey League. hasn't been that much of a gold mine here, obviously, for the Vancouver Canucks being able to get those guys. I mean, Chris Tanev obviously was a free agent that was signed years ago. But other than that, I mean, you look at settlement, I mean, Aiden McDonough and things like that. But I think when you're the Vancouver Canucks, you're Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin, it's your scouting departments, and it's improving your team via that way, and also via trade if you can do it. I don't think you can overpay players anymore.
It's interesting because for the first time in a long time, I actually trust them to get it right on those players that they're taking shots on.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it is when you look at it now, I think I'm not opposed to saying that this management group and this coaching staff finally has the respect of their peers in the National Hockey League.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Jim Rutherford's calling or Patrick Allvin's calling another GM in the National Hockey League, they're looking at it and they're saying, okay, it's Jim Rutherford. I'm going to pick it up.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, not to say that it didn't happen with Jim Benning. I think it was I think the conversations were very, very different.
Sure.
I think that other GMs might have picked up the call because they said, look, and how can we fleece this guy?
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough because, maybe Jim was put in a different position and things like that, but they've got credibility throughout the coaching staff and the management group. And I think that that's one of the things when you look at and you're trying to get involved with teams or making trades for the Canucks. I think this is an extremely good luxury to have.
I love it. Okay, let's get to anyone else.
There's so many.
I know I took the whole segment away. We got a lot of listeners and a lot of people in the YouTube live chat. So I'll get to this one from Jeremy Lee. I'm going to word it a little differently than he did because I think this is what he's trying to say. And I'll try and make it make sense for you, Irf. What is the likelihood that the Canucks bring up Willander and Lekkerimäki if they sign big contracts with Petey and or Philip Hronek? So do you think there's going to be any added sense of urgency to bring Lekkerimäki in, to bring Willander in, if these guys sign contracts?
Not at all. I think that they're going to let them develop and they're going to let them play, and they're not even worried about bringing those guys up right now. I think that's a good way to look at it. You don't need to rush everybody to the National Hockey League. Certain teams will do that because they're desperate.
Yeah.
Vancouver Canucks aren't desperate right now. Let these players develop, let them turn into professionals, and let them work on their game in a different level, away from here, away from this market, away from the pressures that is the NHL, and let them do their thing. I don't think there's a rush at all.
I'm curious your thoughts on this because Tom Willander, I don't watch every game of Tom Willander, but do you think he does the Quinn Hughes thing where he signs at the end of his first collegiate season, or do we see him play next year and then sign at the end of the 2024-25 season rather than at the end of this season?
It all depends on where the Canucks are at, to be completely honest. Like, are they going to sign him and have him hang around and not do anything and watch playoff hockey? I mean, you could do that. He's not going to get in, so you're not going to burn a year of his deal, right? Or you're going to. Or you're going to wait and let him develop and see if he wants to go back and play, right? I don't think that there should be a rush on either of their parties for him to play. I think when he's ready, he should. Yeah,
and I mean, when we talk about the cap, the OEL, buyout, the penalty they're going to have, you probably do want an extra year of Tom Willander on an ELC. Grady, you got something?
Yeah, well, they will need some of those types of players, not necessarily them, because they're going to be up against it, and everyone that's unsigned is going to be, 5-10% more. So, that extra cap space is going to go quickly. Now, it might be some UFAs or a guy like Archdeep Baines, or, you see more of Niels Amon, perhaps Linus Karlsson next year. Not necessarily Lekkerimäki or Willander, but those ELCs are going to come handy at some point down the road. I'm just not sure if it's going to be as early as the end of this season or even next year.
Yeah, it's not going to be their high draft picks. I really don't think it is.
Okay, this one for you, Irf, from Jesse C. Irf, is anyone else the best non-guest segment in the Vancouver hockey market?
Ooh.
There's a good question for you.
I've been on some good ones though.
I
can't. I plead the fifth there. I can't say it. I'm sorry. I love you guys, but
you got to pander to the audience. Come on.
I know it's true. I do, but can't answer that one.
Okay, I'm going to clarify this because Sniper in the YouTube live chat asked, why look for the next Dakota Joshua when you already have the Dakota Joshua at home? And I mean, I'll clarify that. When I say find the next Dakota Joshua, I mean a guy who doesn't have an NHL home that is just thankful to get a one-way deal in free agency from you, where, look, when Dakota Joshua signed, we were all like, okay, who is this guy? Yeah, he can probably play on the fourth line and he'll probably be in and out of the press box. And now he's like a bona fide third liner for this team. And that's what I mean when I say go find the next Dakota Joshua, because once Dakota Joshua turns into the Dakota Joshua, you need to pay him like the Dakota Joshua. And in the cap world, you want to avoid doing that as best you can.
If Dakota Joshua can turn this season into making $2 million on some term, good for him.
Good for him. Just not in Vancouver.
Just not here.
Yeah. Vancouver. Okay. This one from RP88. Irf, both of us, let's answer this one. What do you guys think of Petey's play lately? Is he back to his old self or still getting there? Goal and assist last night. We didn't really bring him up. I thought he was doing a lot of really good things at 5-on-5. And I think for the past week, maybe 2 weeks, we started to see the defense at 5-on-5 really start to pick up, and, you know, being first on pucks, all those things that he does. When you just know he's doing all those things, and obviously he's putting up some points as well. But do you think Petey's back?
I think Tyson Barrie was awful last night on that on that BT goal.
We had someone yesterday say, "Oh, do you guys think they should trade for Tyson Barrie?" And Harman and I were like, "No, definitely not." Anyway, sorry. Continue.
I don't think Tyson Barrie thinks the Vancouver Canucks should trade for Tyson Barrie either, to be completely honest. But look, I think that for Elias Pettersson, it's tough, right? Because, you know, he comes out and says he's not dealing with something. It's obvious that there's something going on there. You mentioned that he doesn't play matchup minutes. You know, he's not playing against the team's top line every single night, and it's tough. He's in a contract year, and then the Canucks are saying, well, we're ready to talk when he's ready to talk. So he's listening and hearing and reading, and he's a very cerebral dude. He sees and hears and reads everything, and he's very thoughtful in the way that he chooses to express himself, both on and off the ice. I think that when he's on, he's as good as any, you know, center in the National Hockey League. I would love to have him on my team. He hasn't shot the puck extremely well this season, to be completely honest. I think we've lost a little bit of that Pettersson shot, the velocity, and things like that. The one-timer on the power play, we haven't really seen it much. Now, maybe that's teams getting smarter and taking that away from the Canucks, but and that's just why they're just getting backdoor, which is why Brock has 50 backdoor tap-in goals all season. But for Elias Pettersson, I think that there's a lot more to give, and I think he'll tell you that as well in his game. And I don't think we've seen the best of him yet this season. That's for sure.
This one from Karan, and it's kind of a follow-up to what you just said, so I'll set you up for it.
Okay. Is
there a reason they don't use Petey's line in a shutdown role? All three are very effective in the defensive end.
Yeah. I mean, you look at face-off numbers. I think I think they like the matchups with JT Miller and the other team's top lines as well. I think home and away is obviously different, you know, way you get the second change and other teams match up. But I just think that, you know, they're more comfortable with other players playing against the team's top line than Elias Pettersson right now.
Okay, this one from Jesse C. Next year or two, will there be less discount contracts for hometown/contender reasons because the cap has been flat for a few years now? That wouldn't surprise me.
Will there be more?
Will there be less of those because players are going to be saying like, no, I want to get paid. I haven't been able to get paid these past couple of years because of COVID and everything and the flat cap.
Ain't nobody taking a discount to live in Vancouver. I'm telling you that right now.
Yeah.
It's just not happening.
Yeah. And that's what we're saying.
It's an expensive city to live in. It's tough. I don't care if you're from here.
The taxes,
yep. Obviously. Vancouver, LA, New York, Toronto. You look at those cities around the National Hockey League, they're among the worst when it comes to taxes in the National Hockey League. And it's tough. I think that Vancouver is now going to become, if they go to the playoffs this year, if and when they go to the playoffs and they make a little bit of noise, I think the free agent question mark is going to change surrounding this team. I think free agents didn't want to play here, not here before, but I think in Canada. But I think if you can make it and you can sell Quinn Hughes, Thatcher Demko, you know, obviously guys like JT Miller and Brock Besser, and that core group, if you can sell some free agents on that, then you can give yourself a shot at landing some big fish, but nobody's taking a discount. It's just not going to happen.
Fair enough. Okay, there's a lot in here, and I don't want to miss any, but I also don't want to read all of them because we've got so many that I want to make them the right ones. Okay, this one, I think this is a good one. Okay, here we go. Irf, this one for you. 7th Street Dream asked, seeing how lethal the Canucks bottom six is, can we risk waiting, re-signing some of them, a la Joshua, Lafferty, and Bluger? Is it all hinging on Elias Pettersson and Filip Hronek?
I think a lot of it has to do with those two for sure. But I think that you'd be naive to think that the Canucks don't know or have an idea of what Elias Pettersson and Filip Hronek or at least what the average number might be on their contract. The term for Elias Pettersson is going to be interesting, whether it's 4 or 5 or 8 or whatever he wants to do. I think that's going to be interesting. But the Canucks have to know what the AAV is going to be. Like, they have to have an idea. Same for Philip Hronek. If he wants that long-term contract, whether it's here, whether it's somewhere else, the Canucks have to know what that number is. So I don't think that it really hinges on those two signing. I think that they're just going to be patient, to be completely honest. I mean, what's to say that, they're behind the scenes not working and looking at trying to improve this roster, and one of those guys that you mentioned is going to be an asset that they use to try and improve. Because if you're trying to improve this team, like I've said before on a number of different programs in the city, you can't just look to improve your team to make the playoffs. You got to look to improve your team, or you can't just go buy a rental because you think you're good enough to just win around. You got to improve your team, not only for this season, but it's got to be for the next couple. So if that's the case, you're looking for a guy that's already has some term, and you're going to be willing to have to part way with assets.
All right. I love it. Okay. Last one. We'll get to this one from Sinochick, and this is going to be the end of the anyone else segment before we get to Betway, which I think you'll really like. Last night, Nashville chose to play the Forsberg line against Miller, so that shows you what the Preds think of Miller as a matchup center. Interesting kind of takeaway from that, but I did find it interesting that they kind of, they went to that and they kind of viewed Miller as the one that, let's put Forsberg up against him.
And then what happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Not good coaching.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really think about it.
Alternatively, how impressed have you been with Rick Tocchet this season?
Yeah. I mean, Frank nailed it on the head. I think around the National Hockey League, it's been impressive. I think the buy-in, not only from Rick, I think it's, from Adam Foote, from, Sergei Gonchar, from what he's been able to do, from Mike Yeo as well. I think there's a lot of respect from the players that they have for this coaching staff. I mean, if you're the Canucks power play group, you're going on the ice for every practice. You're having Rick Tocchet out there, Stanley Cup champion. You're having Sergei Gonchar out there, one of the best defensemen in NHL history. You're having Adam Foote out there, a guy that's played a lot of hockey at elite level, Stanley Cup champion. You're having Daniel Henrik-Sedin out there working with you almost daily. There's Hall of Famers out there. If you can't be excited to get out and go in and put in the work and listen to what these guys are saying, you're in the wrong business.
And, how much has that changed things for the players? How much has that changed the vibe? Because obviously we know it's important what happens up top, of course, but just in terms of the coaching staff, and no, not to rag on anybody who was here before, but how different is it for the players when they get to be able to go do that? Look, what you just outlined.
Well, I think that we can talk a little bit about it. I mean, look, Travis Green at the end of his tenure, lost the room a little bit. And I think that was pretty obvious. I mean, did they play to get him fired? No, I don't think that any of those guys will say that. Obviously, no one ever wants to do that. I think the end of Bruce Boudreau's tenure here was interesting. I think that, it was one of those things, the Bruce, there it is, and the fans and everything, and the bench and all of that. I think that there were some players in that room that kind of had enough of it at the end of it, and they were ready to move on because they knew the potential that this team had. And then they went out and got Rick Tocchet. And when you looked at last season, when Rick Tocchet came in and had those couple of games, and he lit up his team right away.
Yeah.
Right? He said second game. He lit them up. And even when Jim Rutherford took over this job, he's one of his second, I think it was his second press conference. Second press conference that he had. So this team's not good enough to win. And he's right.
Yep.
And right now they might not be good enough to win the Stanley Cup, but they're good enough to make it. So I think when you have those two guys, and Rick and obviously Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin, see eye to eye and everything that they have going on. I think when you're the players, you look at it and you have the stability from the top all the way down. I just think that's a great thing to have.
You said something there that I'm about to disagree with.
What?
That this team can't win the Stanley Cup. Bring it up, Grady. The Betway bet of the day, which is partially done in jest, but it is funny because I had to look it up. I think they have the 7th best odds when I looked over on Betway. That's right. Our bet today is the Vancouver Canucks to win the Stanley Cup this season. A $10 bet at plus 1,600 odds. That's pretty low. Returns you $170 over on Betway. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly.
So would you have?
So maybe don't put the house on the Canucks winning the cup.
Here, don't definitely not.
As I say, please play responsibly.
Yeah, don't do it.
Careful about that one.
So here's my thing: if the Canucks didn't beat the Preds the way they did and dominated the later stages of that game, would you still made that bet today?
Oh, absolutely not.
There you go.
No, I know.
You're listening to this guy?
I'm dead serious. Absolutely not. I wouldn't have said half the things that I said today if they didn't play the way they did.
Trust me, I'm aware.
But 6-0-1 in their last 7.
7-1 against the Central Division.
There you go.
They're the best team in the Central Division, not even in the division.
There you go. You notice I have the screen. That's why I'm laughing. Sorry. Grady brought up the
Oh wow.
I made a meme of Harman yesterday. Hoglander to start the year versus Hoglander now, and it was Harman. When we started the show, it was very bright in his room. Well, not even very bright, but then by the time the show ended, it was just Harman's screen was the only light in that room, and it was the only thing lighting up his face. Got to get that guy a ring light.
Harman doesn't need lights because his future's so bright.
Oh, beautiful. Well said. As was a lot of stuff you said on the show today.
Poor guy was being held hostage in some bunker in Nashville.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah, he was we call it Tootsies. That's what the rest of us call it. Anyways, yeah, thanks so much for joining us, man. It was an awesome day here for you on Canucks Convo. A lot of fun with you today. I have to do one final sweep because I feel like I'm forgetting stuff. Grady, your mic's on again. But we'll close it out there. For my co-host, Irfaan Gaffar, my name is David Quadrelli. That is Grady Sass, you can hear in the background. And thank you so much for listening to an episode of the Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation with Harman and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.